Calvin Winters slipped his cell phone back into his pocket after confirming the final details of what would become his firm's biggest acquisition yet. A $50 million deal merging three failing tech startups into one powerhouse under his quiet control. In the modest suburban neighborhood of Lakeside Heights, no one would suspect that the man driving a 10-year-old sedan was behind Phantom Investments, a private equity firm that operated with stealth and precision. As he pulled into the driveway, Calvin shifted back into his usual role, the struggling financial advisor, just trying to keep his family afloat. He loosened his tie, tousled his hair, and hunched his shoulders a little before heading inside. "You're late again," Sophia Winters called from the kitchen, barely glancing up from her wine glass. "Dinner's cold." "I had to finish some paperwork," Calvin replied, his voice deliberately tired. "Can we salvage it in the microwave?" Sophia scoffed, tapping her nails against the glass. "Do I look like a waitress? There's a plate in the fridge. Your son locked himself in his room after another disaster at school." Calvin nodded and headed toward their son's bedroom. He knocked softly. "Liam, it's Dad. Can I come in?" After a pause, the door cracked open, revealing 14-year-old Liam Winters, tall, with his father's sharp eyes. He stepped aside to let his dad in. The room was a mix of chaos: sketchpads, architecture books, and unfinished building models scattered everywhere. "Mom's on the warpath again," Liam muttered, returning to his desk where he was sketching what looked like a complicated bridge design. Calvin sat down on the edge of the bed. "Rough day at school?" "Mr. Patterson handed back our physics tests. I got a C-, Liam said with a shrug, trying to act indifferent, though the tension in his posture said otherwise. "Mom found it in my backpack," he added quietly. "A C- isn't the end of the world," Calvin said gently. "Tell that to Mom," Liam shot back. "She went ballistic. Said I was wasting my potential. Just like..." He trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. "Just like your old man," Calvin said with a sad smile. "It's okay, Liam. I know how she feels about me." What Sophia didn't know, and what almost no one knew, was that Calvin had deliberately cultivated his image as a mediocre provider. The truth, however, was far more complex. 10 years ago, he discovered his extraordinary talent for identifying struggling businesses with untapped potential. Rather than joining a high-profile firm, he created Phantom Investments, operating it through a maze of shell companies and proxies, allowing him to remain anonymous. Calvin had his reasons for the deception. His father had been a celebrated financial genius, whose success made him a target. When Calvin was 12, his father was kidnapped and held for ransom by people who had thoroughly researched his wealth. Although the police rescued him, the experience left deep psychological scars on Calvin. He'd promised himself that his own family would never face such dangers. But years of playing the underachiever had taken a toll on his marriage. Sophia, who had once genuinely loved Calvin, had grown resentful of what she saw as his lack of ambition. She had married him, expecting the brilliant economics graduate to become a financial titan, not the so-called struggling financial advisor whose modest income barely covered their mortgage. "I noticed you're working on that bridge design for the city competition," Calvin said, shifting the subject. Liam's face lit up slightly. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't be wasting time on it, especially since I'm already messing up my real subjects." "But your passion isn't a waste of time," Calvin interrupted firmly. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." After spending an hour helping Liam refine his bridge design, Calvin headed to the master bedroom. Sophia was already asleep, or pretending to be. Their relationship had devolved into a cold war of silence and sporadic skirmishes. Quietly, Calvin gathered his pillow and a blanket, heading for the guest room, which had become his de facto bedroom over the past year. As he lay in the dark, Calvin scrolled through encrypted messages about the closing procedures for the massive deal the next day. None of his clients had ever met him in person. He conducted all business through secure channels and trusted proxies. Only his attorney, Miranda Powell, knew his true identity, a fact protected by attorney-client privilege. The irony wasn't lost on Calvin while the world saw him as a mysterious legend in high finance, a man whose touch could turn struggling companies into gold. To his wife, he was a disappointment. To his son, he was a well-meaning but ineffectual father. Something would have to change soon. The mask was becoming unbearable. The morning unfolded with its usual routine. Calvin prepared breakfast while Sophia got ready for her job as an event coordinator for Lakeside Heights' wealthiest residents. Her career gave her access to the social circles she craved but couldn't fully engage with, due to what she perceived as Calvin's failures. "I'll be home late," Sophia announced, barely touching her breakfast. "I'm coordinating the Hendersons' anniversary gala. Try not to wait up." Calvin nodded, noticing how she didn't meet his eyes. It was a tell he had cataloged over the years, one that usually meant she was lying. The Hendersons' anniversary wasn't for another 3 weeks, and Calvin knew that because his firm had quietly financed the expansion of Mr. Henderson's luxury watch company. After Sophia left, Calvin drove Liam to school before heading to the small office he maintained downtown, a necessary element in his elaborate charade. His assistant Naomi, one of the few people aware of his dual identity, greeted him with a knowing smile. "The papers are ready for the Triton merger," she said, handing him a thick folder. "And Miranda called. She says everything's in place for the final transfer." Calvin nodded, feeling a curious mix of triumph and emptiness. The $50 million deal would solidify his position as one of the most successful private investors in the country, yet he couldn't share this victory with his family. "I think it's time we discussed phase 2, he said quietly. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Once you start." "I'm sure," Calvin interrupted. "Set up a secure meeting with Miranda for tomorrow morning. It's time to make some changes." Throughout the day, Calvin finalized the details of the deal, his mind partially focused on the elaborate plan he'd been constructing for months. He had originally intended to reveal his success gradually, easing his family into the reality of his wealth. But something told him that scenario was no longer feasible. At 3:15 p.m., Calvin's private phone buzzed with a message from Liam, jolting him with a surge of concern. Liam never texted during school hours. The message was short and urgent. "Failed my math test. Mom's going to freak. Can you come home early?" Calvin immediately cleared his schedule and drove home. He arrived just as Liam walked up the driveway, his shoulders slumped beneath the weight of his backpack and the impending confrontation. "That bad?" Calvin asked gently. Liam handed him the test paper without a word. The large red F at the top was accompanied by a note from the teacher. "Liam seems distracted. Conference needed." "I studied," Liam said defensively. "I just blanked when the test started." "I believe you," Calvin reassured, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Everyone has bad days. We'll figure this out." As they entered the house, they found Sophia already home, her expression thunderous. Calvin realized she must have returned early, perhaps hoping to surprise Liam after school. "Show me," Sophia demanded, holding out her hand. Liam reluctantly handed her the test. Sophia's face flushed with anger as she scanned the paper. "Enough. After all the tutors and study sessions," she said, her voice rising with each word. "This is completely unacceptable." "Liam, what were you thinking?" "I tried," Liam began. "Clearly not hard enough," Sophia interrupted. "This is what happens when you waste all your time on those ridiculous building designs instead of focusing on what actually matters." Calvin stepped forward. "Sophia, let's discuss this calmly. One test doesn't." "Oh, don't start with your mediocre expectations," Sophia snapped, turning her fury on him. "This is partly your fault. He's learning to settle for failure by watching you." Calvin felt the sting of her words, but held his composure. "That's enough, Sophia. Liam needs support." "Support? Where's your support for this family?" Sophia retorted. "You're a walking example of wasted potential." Her voice echoed through the house. "Liam, do you want to end up like your father? A man who can barely keep the lights on? A man whose college colleagues are now running investment firms, while he struggles with basic financial planning for retirees?" "Mom, stop it," Liam pleaded, his face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "No, you need to hear this," Sophia continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your father had every opportunity to be successful, and he threw it all away with his pathetic aversion to risk and lack of ambition. And now, you're following right in his footsteps. You're becoming useless, just like your father." The word useless hung in the air between them. Calvin stood perfectly still. In that moment, something inside him crystallized a decision that had been years in the making. The fact that he had just closed a $50 million deal that morning sat heavily in his mind, a stark contrast to Sophia's view of him. "Liam, go to your room," Calvin said quietly. "Your mother and I need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," Sophia said dismissively, already heading upstairs. "I have to get ready. I'm meeting clients for dinner." She left Calvin and Liam standing in uncomfortable silence. "She didn't mean it, Dad," Liam said awkwardly. Calvin looked at his son, seeing the mixture of embarrassment and pity in the boy's eyes. That pity was the final straw. "Yes, she did," Calvin replied calmly. "But she's wrong about both of us. Remember that, Liam." Later that evening, after Liam had retreated to his room and Sophia had left for her client dinner, Calvin made a series of calls from his home office. The first was to Miranda, followed by Naomi, and finally to his private banker. Each call was brief, direct, and set in motion events that couldn't be undone. As the final call ended, Calvin felt an unusual sense of peace. The mask he had worn for so long was about to come off, and the consequences would be far-reaching. Calvin waited until midnight before heading to the upscale restaurant on the other side of town, the one Sophia had casually mentioned to a friend on the phone, unaware Calvin had overheard. He parked across the street, his expensive binoculars, a tool from his due diligence investigations into potential investments, trained on the restaurant patio. Through the lenses, he watched as Sophia laughed intimately with Bennett Dawson, the flashy owner of several local car dealerships. Calvin recognized him immediately. Dawson had approached Calvin's firm for financing 6 months earlier, unaware that he had actually been meeting with one of Calvin's proxies. Calvin had declined the opportunity after his background check revealed Dawson's history of questionable business practices. The irony was not lost on Calvin. While Sophia believed she was involved with a successful businessman, Calvin knew Dawson's dealerships were barely surviving, propped up by creative accounting and mounting debt. As Dawson reached across the table to stroke Sophia's hand, Calvin felt no jealousy, only a deep sense of clarity. Their marriage had been dead for years. He had simply been going through the motions for Liam's sake. Calvin returned home and spent the rest of the night executing his plan. He accessed a secure server, transferred documents to Miranda, authorized specific banking transactions, and drafted several letters. By dawn, he had completed preparations for what would be the most pivotal day of his life. After catching a few hours of sleep, Calvin drove Liam to school as usual. "Dad," Liam said hesitantly as they approached the school, "about what Mom said yesterday." "Don't worry about it," Calvin replied. "Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're angry. But she said stuff like that before," Liam persisted. "And I've seen how you just take it." Calvin turned to face his son, carefully choosing his words. "Liam, there's something important I want you to understand. Sometimes people aren't who they seem to be. Sometimes we hide parts of ourselves for different reasons." "Like what?" Liam asked, his curiosity piqued. "Let's just say things are going to change soon," Calvin answered. "And I want you to know that no matter what happens between your mother and me, you're the most important person in my life." Liam studied his father's face, sensing the weight of his words. "Okay, Dad," Liam said, quietly accepting the message. "One more thing," Calvin added as Liam opened the car door. "Pack a bag when you get home today. Essentials for a couple of weeks' clothes, your medication, maybe your sketchbook. Tell your mother you're staying at Damon's house for a school project." "Are we going somewhere?" Liam asked, confused. "Trust me," Calvin said simply. "It's time for a change." After dropping off Liam, Calvin drove to Miranda's office. The elegant attorney greeted him with a knowing smile. "Everything's prepared as you requested," she said, gesturing to the stack of documents on her desk. "Though I must say, Calvin, the timing seems a bit sudden." "It's been a decade in the making," Calvin replied, signing where indicated. "I just needed the right catalyst, and Mrs. Winters provided that yesterday." "I presume," Miranda said, her tone professional but her eyes filled with sympathy. Calvin nodded. "She called me useless," he said. "Said I could barely keep the lights on." Miranda raised an eyebrow as she glanced at the banking statement showing Calvin's personal net worth at just over $340 million. "Well," she said dryly, "perception and reality rarely align perfectly." By noon, Calvin had completed the first phase of his plan. The house mortgage had been paid off in full, and ownership was now solely in his name. He had purchased 2 new vehicles, a Tesla Model S Plaid for himself and a Land Rover Defender for Liam, paying in cash, with delivery scheduled for that afternoon. First-class tickets for a world tour were booked for him and Liam, starting in Tokyo. Most significantly, Calvin had confirmed with his banker that $5 million had been transferred into a new trust fund for Liam, structured to secure his education and future while protecting him from any potential financial manipulation. Before heading home, Calvin made one last stop at a high-end electronics store, purchasing 2 new smartphones with international capabilities. Everything about their old life would be left behind, including their digital footprints. When Calvin arrived home, the house was empty, as expected. Sophia had texted to say she'd be working late again. Calvin methodically packed his essential belongings, emptied his home safe of important documents, and transferred his collection of rare coins, a private passion he'd never shared with Sophia, into a secure case. As he worked, Calvin reflected on how completely he had compartmentalized his life. The facade of a struggling financial advisor, Calvin Winters, had been maintained so thoroughly that even his wife had never suspected the truth. His real work, complex deals, and strategic investments that had built his fortune had always been conducted through a network of proxies and secure communications. When Liam returned from school, Calvin helped him pack, explaining only that they were going on a trip together. To his credit, Liam asked few questions, sensing instinctively that something significant was happening. "Dad, is this about what Mom said?" Liam finally asked as they loaded their bags into Calvin's old sedan. "Partly," Calvin admitted, "but it's more about what comes next." Once their belongings were secured, Calvin took a final walk through the house. In the kitchen, He placed an envelope on the counter, positioned where Sophia would immediately see it. Inside was a copy of the paid mortgage statement, the deed transfer, and a brief note in Calvin's precise handwriting. Sophia, I've paid off the house. It's now solely in my name. You may continue to live here if you wish. You'll find 2 new cars in the garage. Consider them my parting gifts, though only one is for you. Liam and I will be traveling for a while. Don't bother trying to reach us on our old numbers. By the way, the lights are still on. I guess I'm not as useless as you thought. Guess who's useless now? As a final touch, Calvin left his wedding ring on top of the note. Father and son drove away just as the afternoon sun began to set, leaving behind a life built on carefully constructed illusions. In the passenger seat, Liam seemed both anxious and exhilarated, occasionally glancing at his father with newfound understanding. Where are we really going, Dad? Liam asked. He finally asked as they headed toward the interstate, and Calvin smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. To see the world, Liam, and to start telling the truth. Sophia Winters arrived home at 11:30 p.m., slightly tipsy from expensive wine and the intoxicating attention Bennett Dawson had lavished on her throughout the evening. She called out for Liam as she entered, then remembered he was supposedly staying at a friend's house for a school project. The house felt unusually quiet, lacking even the subtle sounds of Calvin working in his home office. She kicked off her heels in the foyer and padded into the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when she saw the envelope, her name written in Calvin's neat handwriting, his wedding ring gleaming coldly on top. Something inside her knew, even before opening it, that everything was about to change. Her hands trembled slightly as she read Calvin's note, confusion giving way to disbelief, then to searing anger. She rushed to the garage to confirm his claim and found a new Tesla and Land Rover where Calvin's sedan and her Audi should have been. The vehicles sparkled under the garage lights, price tags still visible on their windshields. Sophia stormed back into the house, grabbing her phone to call Calvin, only to hear his message. The number you have reached is no longer in service. She tried Liam's phone next, with the same result. What the hell is happening? She shouted into the empty house, her voice echoing off the walls that, according to the documents in her hand, now belonged solely to her supposedly useless husband. Rushing to their bedroom, she flung open Calvin's closet door to find it half empty, his favorite suits and casual clothes missing. His dresser drawers were similarly depleted, and in the bathroom, his toiletries were gone. It was as if he had systematically erased himself from their life. Sophia sank onto the bed, her mind racing to make sense of the situation. Calvin had paid off their mortgage, a financial impossibility for the man she thought she knew. He had bought 2 luxury vehicles with cash. None of it aligned with the struggling financial advisor who'd been cutting coupons and driving a car with 150,000 miles on it. She called Bennett, who answered groggily. "What's wrong, babe?" "Calvin's gone," Sophia said, her voice tight with confusion. "He took Liam and left." "Good riddance," Bennett mumbled. "Now we don't have to sneak around anymore." "You don't understand," Sophia snapped. "He paid off the house. He bought 2 cars worth over $200,000 with cash." There was a long silence before Bennett spoke again, his voice now fully alert. "That's impossible. Calvin's broke. Everyone knows that." Apparently, everyone was wrong, Sophia replied bitterly. After hanging up, Sophia began searching the house for clues. Calvin's home office revealed little. He'd taken his laptop and cleared out his filing cabinet. The safe behind the abstract painting was open and empty. By morning, Sophia's confusion had hardened into fury. She began calling everyone they knew, demanding information about Calvin's whereabouts. No one had answers. His office downtown reported that he hadn't come in and wasn't answering calls. In Tokyo, Calvin and Liam checked into the presidential suite at the Park Hyatt. Liam stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing in awe at the sprawling cityscape below. "Dad, how can we afford this?" he asked, gesturing around the luxurious suite. Calvin took a deep breath. "That's something we need to discuss. Sit down, Liam." For the next hour, Calvin revealed the truth about his career and finances. He showed Liam secure photos of the companies he controlled, the investments he'd made, and, finally, his personal banking statements. Liam stared at the screen, his eyes widening as he saw the 9-figure sums displayed. $340 million, he whispered. "All this time, you let Mom think I created a fiction?" Liam asked, disbelief in his voice. Calvin nodded. "At first, it was for security reasons. But over time, it became easier to keep up the lie than to explain why I'd hidden the truth for so long." "Does this have something to do with what happened to Grandpa?" Liam asked, his tone perceptive. Calvin was impressed by his son's intuition. "Partly. When I was about your age, my father was kidnapped by people who targeted him for his wealth. After that, I became paranoid about showing success. But why didn't you at least tell Mom and me?" Calvin paused, choosing his words carefully. Your mother and I married young. I had some success, but was still keeping a low profile. As time went on, she became more resentful of what she saw as my lack of ambition. By the time my wealth had grown significantly, our relationship had soured to the point where I didn't trust her with the truth. And now? Why tell me now? Calvin's expression softened. Because you deserve to know who your father really is. Not the failure your mother described, but not exactly a hero either. Just a man who made complicated choices. Liam sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything. So what happens next? We travel. We learn about each other without the lies between us. And when we return, everything will be different. Calvin reached into his pocket and pulled out a new smartphone. This is yours now. New number, secure communications. I've already loaded it with the contact information for Naomi and Miranda, my assistant and attorney. They can reach us anytime. What about Mom? Calvin's expression hardened slightly. Your mother made her choices long before yesterday. The things she said to you, to us, were just the final straw. As Liam explored their suite, Calvin checked his secure email. Naomi had confirmed that Sophia had been calling the office repeatedly, growing more agitated with each attempt. Miranda reported that Bennett Dawson had tried to access information about Calvin's finances through a private investigator, an expected move that would lead nowhere. Calvin smiled grimly. Phase 1 was complete. Sophia's world was already starting to crack. Phase 2 would shatter it entirely. Back in Lakeside Heights, Sophia's day had gone from bad to catastrophic. She had driven to Calvin's office, demanding answers from his receptionist, only to be told that Calvin had taken an indefinite leave of absence. When she threatened to call the police to report Liam missing, the receptionist, Naomi, calmly handed her a notarized letter from Calvin granting her temporary sole custody during their trip, signed by Sophia herself. I never signed this, Sophia shouted, staring at what appeared to be her perfect signature. Naomi smiled. We have video of you signing it last month, Mrs. Winters. Perhaps you forgot. Sophia knew she was being lied to, but the signature was eerily perfect. She fled the office, her thoughts in chaos. By evening, she had called Calvin's number 50 times. Each attempt was met with the same disconnection message. She sent 30 text messages, ranging from furious demands to tearful pleas. Where the hell are you? Bring Liam home. You can't just take our son and disappear, Sophia snapped. Whatever game you're playing, it's over. Come home, Calvin. Please, let's talk about this. I'm sorry for what I said. I was upset. At least tell me Liam is safe. But no response came. When Bennett arrived that night, his initial disbelief about Calvin's apparent wealth shifted to calculating interest. There has to be an explanation, he said, pacing the living room. Maybe he embezzled the money. Maybe he's running a Ponzi scheme. Calvin's too cautious for that, Sophia replied, her voice hollow. Too risk-averse. Everyone has secrets, Bennett insisted. We need to find out what his are. As Bennett began making calls to his contacts in local finance, Sophia wandered into Liam's room. The space felt different, emptier in subtle ways. His favorite books were gone, along with the architectural model he had been working on for months. On his desk, she found a single sketch, a detailed drawing of the Tokyo skyline with a note at the bottom that read, "First stop." The realization that Calvin had planned this, and that Liam had known they were leaving, sent a wave of betrayal through her. Her son had chosen his father over her. In that moment, Sophia's phone chimed with an incoming email. The subject line read simply, Calvin Winters closes $50 million tech merger. It was a business newsletter she had subscribed to years ago, but usually ignored. With trembling fingers, she opened it and found a feature article about a mysterious investment strategist named Calvin Winters. He had orchestrated one of the year's most significant private equity deals, the merger of 3 tech startups into a new entity called Trier Solutions. The article mentioned Winters's reclusiveness and brilliance, operating primarily through proxies and avoiding the public eye. The final paragraph noted that this latest success added to his estimated net worth of well over $300 million. Sophia stared at her phone, disbelief flooding her. The pieces finally clicked into place. The husband she had belittled for years, the man she had called useless to his face and derided behind his back, was actually one of the most successful private investors in the country. And now, he was gone, taking their son and leaving her with nothing but a paid-off house, a luxury car, and the harsh realization that she had monumentally misjudged the man she had married. Her phone chimed again, this time with an email from Miranda Powell, Calvin's attorney. It contained only a link to a cloud storage folder and a password. When Sophia entered the password, she found hundreds of surveillance photos, images of her and Bennett together over the past 18 months, complete with dates and timestamps. The final image was from 2 nights ago, Bennett's hand intimately placed on her thigh under the table at a restaurant. The message was clear: Calvin had known everything. Sophia's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor of Liam's room, still clutching her son's sketch of Tokyo as the full weight of what she had lost began to sink in. 1 week into their world tour, Calvin and Liam stood at the top of the Tokyo Skytree, gazing out over the sprawling city below. Liam had been flourishing away from his mother's expectations, revealing a natural talent for architecture that Calvin was determined to nurture. "I've been thinking," Calvin said, watching his son sketch the cityscape. "When we get to our next destination, how would you feel about taking some architecture courses?" Liam glanced up from his sketchpad. "Like college courses? Why not? Money's not an issue, and you clearly have both the passion and the aptitude." Liam's face lit up. "That would be amazing, Dad." He hesitated before adding, "I never told Mom how much I loved architecture. She always said it wasn't a real career, like medicine or law." Calvin's jaw tightened for a brief moment. "Your mother and I had different priorities." As they descended in the elevator, Calvin checked his secure phone. There was a message from Naomi with a simple update: "Domino 1 has fallen." Calvin allowed himself a small smile. Phase 2 was progressing exactly as planned. Back in Lakeside Heights, Bennett Dawson stared in disbelief at the foreclosure notice on his desk. His primary bank had called in his loans after an anonymous tip had exposed irregularities in his dealership's financial reporting. The subsequent audit had revealed years of creative accounting and tax discrepancies. "This can't be happening," he muttered, reaching for his phone to call his attorney. Before he could dial, his assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Dawson, there's a Miss Powell here to see you. She says she represents someone interested in purchasing your dealerships." Bennett straightened his tie, a flicker of hope igniting. "Send her in." Miranda Powell entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Without preamble, she placed a folder on Bennett's desk. "My client is prepared to purchase all 3 of your dealerships at 60% of market value, with the deal closing within 48 hours. This offer expires at noon tomorrow." Bennett scoffed. 60%? That's highway robbery. "Who's your client?" Miranda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Someone who knows exactly how desperate your situation is, Mr. Dawson. Someone who also knows about the $430,000 you embezzled from your previous employer 7 years ago, a detail that hasn't reached the auditors yet, but could easily." The color drained from Bennett's face. "How could anyone possibly know about that?" "My client is thorough," Miranda replied, standing to leave. "Noon tomorrow, Mr. Dawson. Take the offer or face the consequences." As Miranda left, Bennett immediately called Sophia, his voice tight with panic. "Something's happening. I'm being set up." "What are you talking about?" Sophia asked, distracted by her own issues. She had just learned that her country club membership had been revoked due to ethical concerns. It was the same country club where she had been coordinating events for Lakeside Heights Elite. "My dealerships are being foreclosed on, and now some lawyer shows up offering to buy them for pennies on the dollar." Sophia felt a chill run through her. She knew things no one should have known. "What was the lawyer's name?" "Powell. Miranda Powell." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "The same lawyer who sent me the photos of my affair? The same one who produced the forged custody document with my signature?" "It's Calvin," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's behind this." "That's impossible," Bennett scoffed. "Calvin's just a small-time financial planner. He doesn't have this kind of power." "You don't understand," Sophia insisted. "Calvin isn't who you think he is. He's worth hundreds of millions. He's been hiding it all these years." There was a long silence before Bennett spoke again. His voice turned calculating. "If that's true, then we need to use it. If he's been hiding assets during your marriage, that's fraud. You could be entitled to half." The idea took root in Sophia's mind instantly. She had already consulted a divorce attorney who had been skeptical about her claims regarding Calvin's hidden wealth. But if she could prove it— "I need to get into his home office," Sophia decided. "There has to be something there, some evidence I missed." After hanging up, Sophia began searching Calvin's office once more. She methodically removed books from shelves, checked behind pictures, and examined the floor for any loose boards. Frustrated, she started pounding on the walls, listening for hollow spots. In a corner behind Calvin's desk, one section sounded different. Sophia examined it closely and discovered a seam cleverly hidden by the wallpaper pattern. She pried at it with a letter opener until a small panel popped open, revealing a hidden safe. Her heart raced as she tried combinations on the digital keypad. Her anniversary, Liam's birthday, and Calvin's birthday all failed. In desperation, she tried her own birthday, and to her surprise, the safe clicked open. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. "For Sophia, when you inevitably find this." With trembling hands, Sophia took the drive to Calvin's computer and plugged it in. The drive contained only one video file, labeled "Watch Me." The video began playing automatically. Calvin appeared on the screen, seated in an office she didn't recognize, an elegant space, not their home office. "Hello, Sophia," the recorded Calvin said calmly. "If you're watching this, it means you found my emergency safe after I initiated Contingency Plan Alpha. Congratulations on your persistence, though I must admit I made this fairly easy to find." Calvin leaned forward slightly. "You're undoubtedly confused by recent events, so let me clarify a few things. Yes, I am wealthy, significantly so. I've spent our entire marriage hiding this fact from you for reasons that once seemed important, but have since become irrelevant as your contempt for me grew." He smiled thinly. "You're probably thinking about divorce now, calculating your share of my fortune. Let me save you the trouble. Every dollar I've earned has been meticulously documented and legally structured to remain my separate property under the laws of our state. The prenuptial agreement you signed, which explicitly covered undisclosed assets acquired during our marriage, has been reinforced by annual legal reviews you unwittingly signed during our tax preparations." Sophia remembered those documents, pages of legal jargon she'd signed without reading while Calvin prepared their seemingly modest tax returns. "Furthermore," Calvin continued, "I've been documenting your affair with Bennett Dawson for the past 18 months. This constitutes marital misconduct under our state's laws, which would significantly reduce any claim you might make even if my assets were marital property, which they are not." The Calvin in the video paused, his expression hardening. "I could have revealed my success years ago, Sophia. I chose not to because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for my money. What I discovered instead was that you didn't love me at all. The contempt you showed, the disdain you expressed, those revealed your true character. As for what happens next," he continued, "that depends partly on you. If you choose to pursue legal action, you'll find yourself facing a team of attorneys who have been preparing for this eventuality for years. If you choose to accept the situation gracefully, you'll find that the house and car I've left you will provide a comfortable life, though perhaps not the one you envisioned when you began an affair with a man whose dealerships are now being foreclosed upon." The video ended with Calvin looking directly into the camera. "One final note, Sophia, Liam knows everything now. All the times you belittled me in front of him, all the pressure you put on him to succeed where you thought I had failed, he now understands the full context of those moments. I'll leave it to you to imagine how that revelation has affected his view of you." The screen went black, leaving Sophia staring at her reflection in the monitor, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. In Switzerland, Calvin and Liam enjoyed a leisurely breakfast at their hotel in Zurich. Liam had just completed his first week of specialized architecture classes at ETH Zurich, where his talent had already drawn attention from the instructors. "Your project impressed Professor Muller," Calvin remarked, scrolling through an email on his phone. "He's asking if you'd consider joining their summer program for gifted students." Liam looked up from his sketchbook, his eyes bright with excitement. "Really? That would be amazing." Calvin smiled, enjoying his son's newfound confidence. The past few weeks had transformed Liam from an insecure, anxious teenager into a young man beginning to recognize his own potential. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Miranda. "Dawson signed the papers. All 3 dealerships now under our control. Domino 2 down." Calvin's smile took on a harder edge as he thought of Sophia, alone in the house they had shared, surrounded by evidence of his success and her misjudgment. He thought of Bennett, signing away his business empire for a fraction of its value to avoid criminal charges. "Everything okay, Dad?" Liam asked, noticing the shift in Calvin's expression. Calvin softened his features. "Everything's exactly as it should be, Liam. Exactly as it should be." By the 3rd month of their world tour, Calvin and Liam had settled into a comfortable routine. They would spend a few weeks in each location, with Liam attending specialized architecture workshops while Calvin managed his business empire remotely. Currently in Barcelona, they had taken an apartment with a stunning view of Gaudí's unfinished masterpiece, La Sagrada Familia. Liam had flourished during their travels, his natural talent for architectural design nurtured by exposure to the world's greatest structures and mentorship from renowned architects. More importantly, the pressure and anxiety that had plagued him in Lakeside Heights had dissipated, replaced by genuine confidence and curiosity. "Dad, Professor Garcia invited me to join his studio session tomorrow," Liam announced as they shared dinner on their terrace. "They're discussing innovative approaches to sustainable urban development." Calvin nodded approvingly. "Sounds perfect for you. Your bridge design incorporated several sustainable elements." Liam hesitated. "That reminds me. I got an email from Mom yesterday." Calvin's expression remained neutral, though his hand tightened imperceptibly around his wine glass. "What did she say?" "She wants me to come home. She says she misses me and that you were..." Liam trailed off uncomfortably. What?" Calvin prompted. "Manipulating me. Turning me against her." Liam met his father's gaze directly. She says, "You're using your money to buy my affection." Calvin considered his response carefully. "And what do you think, Liam?" "I think she never bothered to see who I really was until I was gone," Liam responded, surprising Calvin with his insight. "She never encouraged my interest in architecture or supported my creative projects. She just wanted me to get perfect grades and follow the path she thought was best." "People are complex," Calvin said thoughtfully. "Your mother isn't entirely wrong to want academic success for you." "It wasn't about me, though, was it?" Liam asked perceptively. "It was about how my success or failure reflected on her." Calvin nodded slowly. "That's very insightful. Are you still going to divorce her?" Liam asked, the question hanging heavily between them. "The paperwork has already been filed," Calvin confirmed. "Miranda has been instructed to proceed regardless of your mother's response." Liam was quiet for a moment. "I feel bad for her sometimes. I'm not sure she understands what she's lost." "That's the difference between consequences and punishment," Calvin explained. "I'm not punishing your mother. I'm simply allowing her to experience the natural consequences of her choices." Later that evening, after Liam had retired to his room, Calvin checked his secure messages. One update from Naomi made him smile grimly. In Lakeside Heights, Sophia Winters's world continued to crumble, methodically and precisely as Calvin had planned. The country club had permanently revoked her membership after anonymous evidence surfaced of her berating the staff and making racist remarks about guests. The recordings, carefully edited from Calvin's surveillance, presented her worst moments out of context. Her event planning business had collapsed after her most prestigious clients received anonymous portfolios detailing her affair with Bennett Dawson, complete with timestamps showing she had been with him during events she claimed to be managing. Most devastatingly, her parents, whom she'd always had a strained relationship with, had received a package containing a video of Sophia mocking them to Bennett, calling them small-town nobodies, and expressing relief that Calvin's modest income had given her an excuse to avoid spending holidays with them. The isolation Calvin had engineered was now complete. Sophia's friends had abandoned her, her lover was bankrupt, and his dealership was sold to a holding company Calvin secretly controlled. Her son was traveling the world with a husband she had belittled for years, experiencing educational and cultural opportunities beyond anything she could have provided. Calvin picked up his phone and checked Sophia's latest messages. She had sent 347 texts over the past 3 months, their tone evolving from rage to disbelief to desperate pleading. The most recent read, "Calvin, please, I'm begging you. Let me speak to Liam. Let me explain. I've lost everything. Please don't beg my son too." Calvin left it unanswered, as he had all the others. He opened his laptop and navigated to a secure website where he could view the surveillance feeds from their house in Lakeside Heights. Sophia was sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by empty wine bottles, staring vacantly at her phone, waiting for a response that would never come. Calvin felt no pleasure in her suffering, but neither did he feel remorse. He had simply constructed the perfect consequence for years of contempt, allowing Sophia to experience the same isolation and dismissal she had inflicted on him and Liam. His phone chimed with a message from Miranda, "Final phase ready to implement upon your approval." Calvin typed a simple response, "Proceed." The next morning, in Lakeside Heights, Sophia was awakened by the doorbell. She staggered to the door, disheveled from another night of fitful sleep and too much wine, to find Miranda Powell standing on her doorstep, elegant, as always, in a tailored suit. "Mrs. Winters," Miranda said coolly, "I have some documents that require your attention." Sophia stepped aside wordlessly to let her in. Over the past months, she had learned that fighting against Calvin's attorney was futile. Miranda Powell represented a system of power and privilege that Sophia had once believed herself a part of, but now saw was always beyond her reach. Miranda placed a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. "These are the final divorce papers. My client has been quite generous, all things considered. You may keep the house and car, and he has established a modest trust that will provide you with $5,000 monthly for the next 10 years. Sophia laughed bitterly. "Generous? He's worth hundreds of millions. And as I've explained repeatedly, those assets are legally separate from marital property," Miranda replied evenly. "Furthermore, your documented marital misconduct significantly weakens any claim you might make. The offer on the table is far more than you'd receive if we litigated this matter." Sophia's shoulders slumped in defeat. "And Liam? Mr. Winters has been granted primary physical custody, with visitation rights for you to be determined based on Liam's preferences once he turns 16 next month." Miranda's tone softened slightly. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Winters, Liam is thriving. His architectural talents are being nurtured by some of the field's greatest minds, and he's been accepted into a special program at the Architectural Association in London this fall." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "He always loved designing buildings. I thought it was just a hobby." Perhaps if you had shown more interest in his passion rather than focusing solely on his academic performance, you might have recognized his gifts sooner, Miranda observed, her tone clinical rather than accusatory. After Miranda left, Sophia sat at the kitchen table with the divorce papers, her life reduced to legal language and financial settlements that felt like a pittance compared to what she had lost. Her phone chimed with a text from Bennett, his first in weeks. "It's over, Sophia. I'm moving to Arizona to stay with my brother. Calvin won. He destroyed everything I built." Sophia stared at the message, a hollow laugh escaping her lips. Calvin had indeed won, and so completely that neither she nor Bennett had understood the full scope of his strategy until it was too late. She picked up her phone and typed one more message to Calvin. "I understand now. You were never useless. I was just blind. I'm sorry." For the first time in 3 months, she received a response, apology noted. "Goodbye, Sophia." In Barcelona, Calvin closed his phone and turned his attention back to Liam, who was eagerly showing him the sustainable urban development concept he had created during Professor Garcia's workshop. "This is really impressive, Liam," Calvin said sincerely, studying the intricate design. "You have a remarkable talent." Liam beamed at the praise. "Do you think we could visit London next? There's an exhibition at the Royal Institute of British Architects I'd love to see." "London it is," Calvin agreed, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. "The world is yours to explore, Liam. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." As they discussed their plans for London, Calvin felt a sense of completion. Phase 3 of his plan was now in motion, bringing his strategy full circle. Sophia was isolated and humbled, Bennett was financially ruined, and most importantly, Liam was flourishing away from the toxic environment they had created. The mask Calvin had worn for so long was permanently discarded, allowing both him and Liam to finally live authentically. Any guilt Calvin might have felt about the calculated destruction of Sophia's life was overshadowed by the knowledge that Liam would never again be made to feel inadequate by someone who should have nurtured his gifts. The strategist had played the long game and won decisively, as he always did. 1 year had passed since Calvin and Liam left Lakeside Heights. After completing their world tour, they had settled in London, where Liam had been thriving at the prestigious Architectural Association. Calvin had purchased a historic townhouse in Kensington and set up a new headquarters for Phantom Investments nearby, finally stepping into the public eye to take credit for his financial successes. On a crisp autumn morning, Calvin sat in his home office reviewing quarterly reports when his secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Miranda Powell. "Miranda, good morning," Calvin answered. "I trust everything is proceeding as planned?" "Better than planned," Miranda replied. "The Bennett Dawson situation has been fully resolved. After the bankruptcy proceedings, we were able to acquire his remaining assets through our shell company for pennies on the dollar. His attempt to file a lawsuit claiming you orchestrated his downfall was dismissed for lack of evidence yesterday." "Excellent," Calvin said, making a note in his calendar. "And Sophia?" "She's accepted the revised settlement terms," Miranda confirmed. "In exchange for the additional monthly stipend, she's agreed to waive all future claims and maintain confidentiality about your financial history. She's also agreed not to contact Liam unless he initiates communication." Calvin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The final pieces of his strategic extraction from his former life were falling into place with the precision he had envisioned. "Thank you, Miranda. Your work on this has been invaluable." After ending the call, Calvin found Liam in the townhouse's sunroom, working on an architectural model for his latest school project. "That looks impressive," Calvin observed, studying the intricate design. "Is this for Professor Harrington's sustainability challenge?" Liam nodded, carefully adjusting a miniature solar panel array on the model's roof. "It's a community center that generates more energy than it uses. I'm incorporating water reclamation systems and vertical gardens." Calvin smiled with genuine pride. In the years since they'd left Lakeside Heights, Liam had transformed from an anxious, underperforming student into a confident young architect in training, with designs that had already won 2 student competitions. "I heard from Miranda this morning," Calvin said, taking a seat across from Liam. "The divorce is finally settled." Liam's hand stilled on his model. "How's Mom accepting the situation?" Calvin replied carefully, "The agreement includes a provision that she won't contact you directly. Any communication would need to be initiated by you." Liam was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not ready to talk to her yet. Maybe someday, but not now." "That's entirely your decision," Calvin assured him. "There's no rush. Has she tried to contact you again?" Calvin hesitated before answering truthfully. "Yes, she sends messages occasionally primarily about financial matters, but sometimes asking about you." What Calvin didn't share was the nature of Sophia's most recent message, sent late at night with the desperation of someone who had lost everything. "I know what you did, Calvin. Not just to me, but to Bennett. You systematically destroyed both of us. Was it worth it? Did ruining our lives make you feel powerful? He had left it unanswered, as he did most of her messages. Now, I have some news of my own, Calvin said, changing the subject. I've been invited to deliver a keynote address at next month's Global Investment Summit. I've decided to accept. Liam looked up in surprise. Really? You're going public with everything? Not everything, Calvin clarified. But I'm tired of operating exclusively from the shadows. It's time for Calvin Winters to take credit for his achievements. Later that afternoon, Calvin met with Naomi, who had relocated to London to continue as his chief of staff. They sat in his private study, reviewing the final reports on what Calvin still referred to as the lakeside situation. Bennett Dawson has moved to Phoenix, Naomi reported, consulting her tablet. He's working as a sales manager at his brother's plumbing supply company. His attempt to rebuild in the automotive industry failed when our contacts ensured his loan applications were rejected. Calvin nodded, satisfied. And the property? The former Dawson automotive locations have been successfully converted. 2 are now Tesla dealerships, and the third is being developed as a technical training center for disadvantaged youth. Calvin allowed himself a small smile at the irony. Dawson's former flagship dealership, from which he had orchestrated both financial fraud and his affair with Sophia, was now providing opportunities for young people to build legitimate careers. Sophia's former clients? Calvin asked. All successfully transferred to our preferred vendors, Naomi confirmed. Her attempts to rebuild her event planning business in Lakeside Heights have been consistently thwarted. As you predicted, the social isolation has been her most difficult adjustment. Calvin nodded, feeling no pleasure in this confirmation but acknowledging the strategic success. And Liam? All his school records have transferred and been updated. His current transcript shows remarkable improvement. Professor Harrington specifically mentioned his potential for a scholarship to the architectural graduate program at Cambridge. Pride swelled in Calvin's chest. He's extraordinary. All he needed was the right environment to flourish. As Naomi departed, Calvin poured himself a rare glass of scotch and stood by the window overlooking the garden, where Liam was now sketching a section of the ornate Victorian greenhouse. The past year had unfolded almost exactly as Calvin had planned, a strategic dismantling of his false life and the reconstruction of an authentic one. The revenge he had taken against Sophia and Bennett had been meticulous and absolute, designed not merely to punish but to systematically deconstruct the foundations of their existence, just as they had attempted to do to him and Liam with their emotional abuse, manipulation, and betrayal. Calvin's phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. The text was brief but sent a chill through him. Revenge has a cost, Calvin, and bills always come due. For the first time since leaving Lakeside Heights, Calvin felt a flicker of unease. Bennett Dawson had been thoroughly defeated, financially ruined, socially disgraced, and legally compromised. He should have no resources left for threats. Calvin forwarded the message to his security team with instructions to trace its origin and increase surveillance on both Bennett and Sophia. The strategist in him recognized that even the most brilliant plans could have unforeseen variables. As evening fell over London, Calvin joined Liam for dinner in their formal dining room, pushing the unsettling message from his mind to focus on his son's animated description of his latest architectural inspiration. I've been thinking about what you said about giving back, Liam said as they finished their meal. About using privilege to create opportunities for others. Oh, Calvin prompted, intrigued. I'd like to establish a scholarship, Liam continued, for students interested in sustainable architecture who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. We could fund it through the foundation you mentioned starting. Calvin felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. The son he had rescued from a toxic environment had not only thrived himself, but was already thinking about extending that opportunity to others. That's a wonderful idea, Liam. We'll set it up first thing tomorrow. Later that night, after Liam had retired to his room, Calvin received a call from his security chief. Sir, we've traced the message. It didn't come from Bennett Dawson. It came from a burner phone purchased in London 3 days ago. Calvin's blood ran cold. London? Are you certain? Positive, sir. The phone was used within 2 miles of your residence. Calvin immediately checked the security system, confirming that all entrances were secure and the alarm was active. Then he quietly walked to Liam's room, opening the door just enough to ensure his son was sleeping peacefully. Someone from his past had followed them to London, someone with a grudge and enough resources to track them down despite their careful relocation. Calvin returned to his study and opened his laptop, accessing the secure server where he kept contingency plans for every conceivable threat. He had not built his fortune by being unprepared, and he would not risk Liam's safety by underestimating this new danger. Whoever had sent that message would soon learn that Calvin Winters' capacity for strategic ruthlessness had only begun to show itself. The mystery of the threatening text deepened over the following week. Calvin's security team traced the burner phone's movements through central London, but lost the trail when it was apparently discarded near Paddington Station. Enhanced security measures were implemented around both the townhouse and Liam's school, with plainclothes guards maintaining discreet surveillance. Calvin had not shared the threat with Liam, unwilling to disrupt the stability his son had found. Instead, he maintained his regular schedule while quietly activating a network of contacts to investigate who might have followed them from Lakeside Heights. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Calvin was meeting with investors at Phantom's London headquarters when his secure line rang with Naomi's designated code. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said smoothly to the venture capitalists gathered around his conference table. "I need to take this." In his private office, Calvin answered. "What's happened?" "A possible security concern," Naomi reported. "A woman matching Sophia's description was photographed by our surveillance system near Liam's school yesterday. She didn't approach the building but observed it for approximately 20 minutes before leaving in a taxi." Calvin's grip tightened on the phone. "Confirm it's her. Then have the security team bring her to the Belgravia safe house. No interaction with Liam." "Understood, sir." Calvin ended the call, his mind already calculating probabilities and consequences. Sophia had never been particularly resourceful or determined. For her to track them to London and conduct surveillance suggested either a dramatic change in character or external assistance. The threatening text message took on new significance in this context. Could Bennett Dawson be coordinating with Sophia from Phoenix? The timing seemed more than coincidental. Calvin returned to his meeting, maintaining his composed exterior while his mind worked through contingency scenarios. If Sophia had indeed come to London, she had violated the non-contact agreement in their divorce settlement, which gave Calvin legal leverage, but it didn't explain how she had found them or what her intentions were. Later that evening, Calvin received confirmation from his security team. Facial recognition had verified Sophia's identity from the surveillance footage. She was staying at a mid-range hotel in Bayswater under her maiden name, Morrison. "Should we proceed with the interception, sir?" his security chief asked over the secure line. Calvin considered the options. Confronting Sophia directly might provide answers, but it could also escalate the situation unpredictably. Maintain surveillance for now, he decided. "I want to know who she contacts, where she goes, and especially if she tries to approach Liam again." After ending the call, Calvin went to check on Liam, finding him engrossed in a complex CD design in his home workspace. "Working late?" Calvin asked casually. Liam looked up with a tired smile. "Final revisions for the Sustainable Housing Project. Professor Harrington thinks it has potential for the Buckminster Fuller Prize." Calvin's chest swelled with pride, even as his concern for Liam's safety intensified. His son had thrived beyond his expectations, once freed from Sophia's constant criticism and pressure to conform to her narrow vision of success. "Don't stay up too late," Calvin advised, resisting the urge to warn Liam of potential danger. "Your presentation is important, but so is rest." The next morning, Calvin was reviewing security footage from overnight monitoring when his phone chimed with another text from the unknown number. "Your son's design project is impressive. The vertical garden integration is particularly innovative. Does he know about his mother yet?" A cold rage settled in Calvin's chest. Not only was the sender aware of Liam's architectural work, but they had specifically referenced Sophia's presence in London. This was no longer a vague threat, it was a targeted provocation. Calvin immediately called his security chief. "Bring Sophia in." Within 2 hours, Calvin stood in the sparsely furnished living room of a nondescript townhouse in Belgravia, one of his secure locations. His security team had intercepted Sophia leaving her hotel and brought her there without incident. She sat on the sofa, looking both defiant and somehow diminished from the confident, status-obsessed woman he had married. Her designer clothes had been replaced with off-the-rack items, and her once perfect manicure was noticeably absent. "Hello, Sophia," Calvin said flatly. "I believe our divorce agreement included a no-contact provision regarding Liam." Sophia met his gaze directly. "I haven't contacted him. I just wanted to see him from a distance to know he's all right." "He's thriving," Calvin replied coldly. "No thanks to your years of undermining his confidence and dismissing his talents." "I made mistakes," Sophia admitted, surprising Calvin with her directness. "I was wrong about many things, including you." Calvin's expression remained impassive. "Your regrets are irrelevant. What concerns me is how you found us and who you're working with." Confusion flickered across Sophia's face. "Working with? I'm not working with anyone. I hired a private investigator to find you. That's all." "And the texts?" Calvin pressed. "Are you going to deny sending those as well?" "What texts?" Sophia asked, her confusion genuine. "I don't know what you're talking about." Calvin studied her carefully. Either Sophia had become an exceptional actress, or she genuinely didn't know about the threatening messages. Before he could pursue this line of questioning further, his phone rang with his security chief's emergency code. "Excuse me," he said tersely, stepping into the adjoining room. "What is it?" Calvin asked. "Sir, we have a situation at Mr. Liam's school," the security chief reported urgently. "A man tried to approach him while students were changing classes. Our operative intercepted him before contact was made. The man fled but dropped his phone, and it matches the one used to send the texts." Calvin's blood ran cold. "Is Liam safe?" "Yes, sir." Our operative ensured Liam remained unaware of the incident. "The school has been notified of a potential security concern, though without specifics." "I want the surveillance footage immediately," Calvin ordered, "and increase Liam's security detail to 3 operatives, effective immediately." Calvin ended the call and returned to where Sophia was waiting, his mind racing with possibilities. If she wasn't behind the texts and Bennett Dawson was supposedly in Phoenix, then who did she hire to find them? Calvin demanded. "Who did you hire?" Sophia blinked at his sudden intensity. "A private investigator recommended by Bennett. His name was Nathan something. He specialized in international cases." The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Calvin had been so focused on Sophia as the potential threat that he'd overlooked the possibility of a more sophisticated player in the background. "When did you last communicate with Bennett?" Calvin asked. "About 2 months ago," Sophia replied. "He said he had a lead on where you might have gone after your world tour. That's when he recommended Nathan." Calvin's tactical mind recalculated quickly. Bennett Dawson had more resources than anticipated, possibly through family connections or undiscovered assets. More importantly, he had cleverly used Sophia as an unwitting distraction while positioning someone else, presumably Nathan, to approach Liam directly. Calvin turned to his security chief, who had entered the room. "I want everything we have on Bennett Dawson's family connections, particularly any with military or intelligence backgrounds. I also want a full background check on any private investigator named Nathan who specializes in international cases." Turning back to Sophia, Calvin made a rapid decision. "You're going to remain in our custody until this situation is resolved. Your presence in London has complicated matters significantly." "Custody?" Sophia repeated incredulously. "You can't just hold me prisoner." "I can, and I will," Calvin replied without emotion. "You violated our agreement by coming here. More importantly, you've inadvertently placed Liam in danger by leading Bennett's operative to him." As Sophia processed this accusation, Calvin's phone chimed with another text message that made his blood run cold. "The game changes now, Calvin. Your protection isn't as thorough as you think. If I can get this close to Liam once, I can do it again. Let's discuss terms." Attached was a photo taken that very morning of Liam entering his school, clearly shot from close range without Calvin's security team detecting the photographer. Calvin showed the message to his security chief, whose expression darkened. "Sir, this level of surveillance suggests professional training, possibly former intelligence or special forces." Calvin nodded grimly. "Find out exactly who we're dealing with, and move Liam to the safe house in Cornwall immediately. Use the school's emergency protocol we established." As his team sprang into action, Calvin turned back to Sophia, whose face had gone pale upon seeing the photo of Liam. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Calvin, you have to believe me. I would never put Liam in danger." "Intentionally, perhaps not," Calvin conceded. "But your resentment and Bennett's desire for revenge have created this situation, nonetheless." Later that evening, Calvin sat in the secure communications room of his Kensington townhouse, monitoring Liam's transport to the remote Cornwall property. The extraction had gone smoothly, with Liam only informed that a credible security threat required his temporary relocation. His security team had gathered preliminary information on Nathan Rhee, the operative hired by Bennett. The profile was troubling. Former British intelligence, highly trained in surveillance and extraction, dishonorably discharged for unauthorized operations, and later working as a high-end private contractor for clients seeking morally ambiguous services. Calvin's phone rang with an unlisted number. He activated the call tracing protocol before answering. "Winters," he said tersely. "Impressive security response today," came the smooth, cultured voice. "Your son was relocated within 3 hours of the incident. Professional work." "Nathan Rhee," Calvin replied, signaling his team to continue tracing the call. "Bennett Dawson must be paying you well for this level of operation." "Dawson provided the motivation and initial funding," reconfirmed casually, "but I've developed a personal interest in this case." "You're quite the strategic mind, Calvin. The way you systematically dismantled Dawson and your ex-wife artistry. What do you want?" Calvin demanded, keeping Rhee talking while the trace continued. "Originally, I was helping Dawson gather evidence of your financial manipulations. Now, I'm more interested in testing my skills against someone of your caliber. It's rare to find a worthy opponent. The casual arrogance in Rhee's tone sent a chill through Calvin. This wasn't just a revenge mission anymore. It had evolved into something far more dangerous, a personal challenge from a trained operative who saw the situation as an intellectual game. Then you should know you're outmatched, Calvin replied coldly. I've identified you. I know your background, and my resources far exceed anything Dawson could provide. Rhee chuckled. That's what makes this interesting. Here's my proposal. I'll cease all operations targeting your son in exchange for $10 million transferred to an offshore account. Consider it a consulting fee for exposing the weaknesses in your security protocols. Calvin's security chief signaled that they had triangulated Rhee's location to within 2 city blocks. You've miscalculated, Rhee, Calvin said, his voice dangerously soft. I don't negotiate with threats to my family. What I do is eliminate them permanently and thoroughly. Bold words, Rhee replied, sounding amused rather than concerned. We'll see whose strategy prevails. Give my regards to Sophia. The line went dead just as Calvin's team pinpointed Rhee's exact location. Deploy the interception team, Calvin ordered. I want Rhee contained within the hour. As security personnel mobilized, Calvin turned to the surveillance feed showing Sophia in the safe house's secured guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her posture reflecting defeat and confusion. Calvin had dismissed her as a direct threat, but she remained a liability, a potential point of leverage Rhee could exploit. The strategic move would be to isolate her completely until the situation was resolved. Yet for the first time since executing his revenge against Sophia and Bennett, Calvin felt a flicker of doubt. Not about the justice of his actions, their betrayal had earned the consequences he delivered, but about the collateral damage his strategy had created in targeting Bennett Dawson so completely. In doing so, Calvin had inadvertently created a desperate man with nothing left to lose. That desperation had led to the hiring of Nathan Rhee, who now posed a legitimate threat to Liam's safety. The strategist in Calvin recognized the irony. His perfect revenge had created an unforeseen vulnerability, exactly the scenario he had built his business success on avoiding. As he monitored the interception team's progress toward Rhee's location, Calvin made a cold calculation. This threat couldn't be managed with conventional security measures alone. It would require the same methodical, ruthless approach he had used to dismantle Sophia and Bennett's lives. Nathan Rhee had made a critical mistake in directly challenging Calvin Winters. He was about to learn just how thoroughly the silent strategist could respond when his son's safety was at stake. The Cornwall safe house resembled a picturesque country estate from the outside, its stone walls and manicured gardens hiding state-of-the-art security systems and reinforced construction. Calvin arrived by helicopter shortly after dawn, having spent the night coordinating the manhunt for Nathan Rhee. The interception team had missed Rhee by mere minutes, finding only the burner phone he'd used to call Calvin, left deliberately on a park bench. The psychological warfare was clear. Rhee was demonstrating his ability to anticipate Calvin's moves. Calvin entered the main house to find Liam in the sunroom, sketching the dramatic coastline visible through the windows. Despite the rushed relocation, his son appeared calm, a testament to the resilience Liam had developed over the past year. Morning, Dad, Liam greeted him, looking up from his sketchpad. Your security team runs a tight ship. Blake wouldn't even let me walk in the garden without an escort. Calvin managed a reassuring smile. Just precautionary. How are you holding up? Liam asked. Liam shrugged. It's not every day you get whisked away to a secret mansion because of a security concern. Are you going to tell me what's really happening? Calvin had prepared for this question during the helicopter flight. Liam deserved some version of the truth, even if not every detail. Someone from our past in Lakeside Heights has been making threats, Calvin explained, taking a seat across from Liam. We have reason to believe they might try to approach you. Liam studied his father's face intently. Mom? No, Calvin said, though she was involved indirectly. She's actually here, in a separate wing of the house. Liam's eyebrows shot up. Mom's here? Since when? Since yesterday, Calvin replied. She came to London hoping to see you, which inadvertently led someone else to your school. Liam was silent for a moment, processing the information. The person making threats, it's connected to what you did to Mom and Mr. Dawson, isn't it? Calvin had consistently underestimated his son's perceptiveness. Yes, it appears Mr. Dawson hired someone to gather information that could be used against me legally. That person has now gone beyond his original assignment. Can I see Mom? Liam asked unexpectedly. Calvin hesitated. Is that something you want? I'm not sure, Liam admitted, but I think I need to. After a moment's consideration, Calvin nodded. I'll arrange it, but I need to speak with her first. In a secured meeting room, Calvin faced Sophia across a polished oak table. She looked exhausted, but had regained some composure since their confrontation in London. Liam wants to see you, Calvin stated without preamble. Before I allow that, I need absolute clarity about your involvement with Ree. I've told you everything, Sophia insisted. Bennett recommended him. I paid him to find you and Liam. That's all. Did you discuss revenge with Bennett? Exposing my financial dealings. Anything that might have motivated Ree to go beyond simply locating us? Sophia hesitated, confirming Calvin's suspicion that she wasn't being entirely forthcoming. Bennett mentioned something about proving you had manipulated financial markets to destroy his business. She finally admitted, he thought that if we could get evidence, we might be able to negotiate a better settlement. But I never authorized anything that would put Liam at risk. Calvin studied her, weighing the likelihood that she was telling the truth. Bennett's thirst for revenge had created a dangerous situation. Ree wasn't just a private investigator, he was a former intelligence operative with specialized training, the type of person who saw this as a game, not a job. Fear flickered across Sophia's face. What does he want? Money, supposedly, Calvin replied, his voice cold. But I suspect his motivation has evolved into something more personal. He wants to match wits with someone he sees as a worthy opponent. What are you going to do? Calvin's expression hardened. What I've always done when faced with a threat to my family, identify the vulnerabilities and exploit them decisively. Before Sophia could respond, Calvin's secure phone rang with his security chief's code. Excuse me, he said, stepping away from the table. Go ahead, sir. We've intercepted communications between Ree and Dawson, the chief said. Dawson appears to be en route to London, arriving at Heathrow tomorrow morning on BA Flight 289 from Phoenix. Interesting timing, Calvin observed. Have a team ready to intercept Dawson at the airport and continue monitoring Ree's known associates. He'll need local support for whatever he's planning. After ending the call, Calvin returned to Sophia. It seems Bennett is more deeply involved than you suggested. He's flying to London as we speak. Sophia's surprise appeared genuine. I had no idea. He told me he couldn't afford to travel internationally anymore. Apparently, he found resources for this particular trip, Calvin replied dryly. Which raises questions about his true financial situation and what he hopes to accomplish by coming here personally. A theory was forming in Calvin's mind, one that explained both Ree's psychological warfare approach and Bennett's sudden appearance. This wasn't merely about revenge or money. It was about reversing the power dynamic that Calvin had meticulously built by dismantling their lives. I'll arrange for you to see Liam this afternoon, Calvin told Sophia, making a rapid strategic decision. In the meantime, I'd like you to call Bennett. Sophia looked confused. Call him. What for? To find out exactly what he's planning, Calvin replied. He still believes you're working with him. Later that day, after Sophia's supervised call to Bennett had confirmed Calvin's suspicions, Liam sat nervously in the same meeting room, awaiting his mother. Calvin had prepared him with a sanitized version of events, emphasizing that while Sophia had made poor choices, she had never intended to put him in danger. When Sophia entered, her composure momentarily faltered at the sight of her son. Liam had grown taller, his features more defined, and he carried himself with a confidence that hadn't been there when he'd left Lakeside Heights. Lo, she said softly, you look wonderful. Liam remained seated, his expression guarded. Hi, Mom. Calvin observed their reunion from the security monitoring room, watching the awkward conversation unfold. Sophia tried to bridge the gap of the past year with questions about Liam's studies and life in London. Liam answered politely, but maintained an emotional distance that clearly pained her. Your father tells me you've been accepted into a special program at the Architectural Association, Sophia said, trying to connect. That's amazing, Liam. You always said architecture wasn't a real career path. Liam replied evenly, that I was wasting my time with those silly building designs. Sophia winced as her own words were quoted back to her. I was wrong about a lot of things, Liam, Sophia admitted, her voice softening as the conversation continued. Just then, Calvin's security chief entered the monitoring room with an update. Sir, the team intercepted Dawson at Heathrow as planned. He's being transferred to our secondary location for questioning. A preliminary search of his belongings found this. He handed Calvin a thumb drive in an evidence bag. Preliminary analysis suggests it contains sophisticated malware designed to penetrate financial systems, tools similar to those used in state-sponsored hacking operations. Calvin's suspicions solidified into certainty. Ree wasn't just searching for evidence of his financial manipulations, he was planning to plant it. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. If Ree couldn't find legitimate proof of Calvin's supposed financial crimes, he would fabricate it, using Bennett as the delivery mechanism. The goal wasn't just revenge. It was a complete reversal, to frame Calvin for the very market manipulation and fraud he had exposed in Bennett's business operations. Increase security protocols on all Phantom investment systems immediately, Calvin ordered. Prepare the conference room. I want to speak with Dawson personally. An hour later, Calvin faced Bennett Dawson across a table in the secure conference room. The once flashy car dealer now looked diminished, his designer suit replaced by casual travel clothes, his confident demeanor shattered by a year of financial and social ruin. "Hello, Bennett," Calvin greeted him coldly. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Bennett attempted a defiant sneer, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, Winters." Calvin placed the thumb drive on the table between them. "This sophisticated piece of malware, Nathan Ree gave it to you to plant in my financial systems." Did he explain that it would create false evidence of market manipulation, evidence that could be traced back to my accounts? Or did he simply tell you it would get the evidence you needed? Uncertainty flickered across Bennett's face. "You've been targeting me for over a year, destroying my businesses, ruining my reputation, all because I fell in love with your wife." Calvin's laugh was devoid of humor. "Love? Is that what you call it? You pursued a married woman because you thought she was the wife of a financially struggling advisor, an easy conquest who'd be impressed by your flashy lifestyle and apparent success." Bennett's facade cracked further as Calvin continued relentlessly. "That's not when you discovered my true financial status. Your interest evolved from mere infidelity to strategic opportunity. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." Bennett's face contorted with frustration. "You systematically destroyed everything I built." "No, Bennett," Calvin replied coolly. "I simply exposed what you had already corrupted through your own actions. The financial fraud at your dealerships predates my involvement by years. The tax evasion was your choice. I merely ensured the appropriate authorities became aware of it." Calvin leaned forward slightly. "But that's not why you're here. You're here because Nathan Ree convinced you that you could reverse our positions, frame me for financial crimes using this malware, and then expose me, just like I exposed you." Bennett's silence confirmed Calvin's assessment. "What you failed to consider," Calvin continued, "is that Ree has his own agenda. Once he realized the extent of my resources, this became a game to him, a chance to test his skills against someone he considers a worthy opponent." "You're merely a pawn in his actual strategy," Calvin added. "He promised me revenge." Bennett muttered weakly, "A chance to rebuild. At what cost?" Calvin asked pointedly. "Did he mention that his approach has endangered Liam? That he's been conducting surveillance on a 14-year-old boy?" Bennett's expression shifted as genuine concern broke through his resentment. Despite his many flaws, Calvin had noticed that Bennett had always treated Liam with kindness during his relationship with Sophia. "I never agreed to anything involving Liam," Bennett insisted. "The plan was just to get evidence of your financial manipulations." "Yet here we are," Calvin replied coldly, "with my son under protection because your operative decided to escalate the situation into personal territory." Calvin slid a document across the table. "This is a full confession detailing your involvement with Ree, including the planned cyber attack on my financial systems. Sign it, and I'll ensure you return to Phoenix with enough resources to start over, far from my family. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to pursue this as an attempted cyber crime, with all the legal consequences that entails." Bennett stared at the document, then at Calvin. "Ree is my concern, not yours." After Bennett signed the confession, Calvin had him escorted to a secure location where he would remain until the situation with Ree was resolved. With one liability contained, Calvin turned his full attention to the more dangerous threat. The psychological profile his team had compiled on Nathan Ree suggested a man motivated by intellectual challenge rather than financial gain. This presented both a vulnerability and an opportunity. Ree's ego could be leveraged against him. Calvin instructed his security team to leak information suggesting that Liam was being moved to a different safe house, a classic misdirection play that would appeal to Ree's intelligence background. Meanwhile, Calvin implemented the final phase of his counter-strategy. That evening, as Calvin reviewed the security arrangements with his team, Liam entered his temporary office at the Cornwall estate. "I spoke with Mom," Liam said, taking a seat across from his father. "She told me some things about what happened in Lakeside Heights, about how you systematically dismantled her life and Mr. Dawson's after we left." Calvin studied his son carefully. "Yes, I did. She says you destroyed her reputation, isolated her socially, and bankrupted Mr. Dawson's businesses as revenge for how they treated you." "That's a simplified version, but essentially accurate," Calvin confirmed, not trying to sugarcoat his actions. Liam was quiet for a moment. "The same strategic thinking you use in business, you used against them." "Yes, and now someone's using similar tactics against you," Liam observed. "Doesn't that make you question whether your approach was right?" Calvin considered his response carefully. "The difference is intent, Liam. I never endangered innocent people in my actions against your mother or Bennett. This man, Ree, has chosen to target you, someone completely uninvolved in the original conflict." Liam nodded slowly. "I understand the difference. I just I'm trying to reconcile the father I've come to know this past year with someone capable of such calculated destruction. I won't apologize for protecting you from people who were causing you harm, Calvin said firmly. Your mother's constant criticism and dismissal of your talents was damaging you in ways that became clear only after we left. Bennett's relationship with her directly contributed to that toxic environment. So what happens now? Liam asked. With this person? He'll be dealt with, Calvin replied simply. And then we'll return to our lives in London. Calvin sighed. That's partly up to you, Liam. If you want a relationship with her, I won't prevent it, but it would need to be structured carefully to ensure she doesn't return to her previous patterns of behavior. Later that night, Calvin received the call he had been expecting from his security team leader. Target took the bait. Ree attempted to access the decoy safe house location. He's been apprehended and is being transported to the secure facility now. Excellent. I'll speak with him in the morning, Calvin replied. At dawn, Calvin entered the interrogation room where Nathan Ree was being held. The former intelligence operative presented a stark contrast to Bennett Dawson, calm, composed, and showing no signs of stress despite his captivity. Mr. Winters, Ree greeted him with unexpected cordiality. I wondered when you'd make an appearance, Calvin replied, taking a seat across from him. I believe we have matters to discuss. Ree smiled thinly. Indeed. Though I must compliment your team on the elegant misdirection play. The leaked transport plans were convincing enough to warrant investigation, yet contained subtle inconsistencies that should have alerted me. A test within a test. Impressive. You mistake me for someone interested in playing games, Calvin said coldly. You targeted my son. That was your fatal error. Business, Mr. Winters, Ree responded smoothly. Bennett Dawson paid for results, and yet you escalated beyond his parameters, developing what your communications described as a personal interest in the case. Calvin produced a folder containing printed emails between Ree and his associates. That's when this ceased to be business and became something else entirely. Ree's expression remained neutral, but Calvin detected a flicker of surprise at the revelation that his communications had been compromised. Your methods with Dawson and your ex-wife were artwork, Ree admitted. I recognized a kindred strategic mind. Few people appreciate the elegance of systematic deconstruction. Calvin ignored the attempt to establish common ground. Here's what happens next, he said. The evidence of your planned cyber attack has been secured. Bennett Dawson has provided a signed confession detailing your involvement. I have 3 options regarding your fate. Ree raised an eyebrow, still maintaining his composure. I'm listening. Option 1, Calvin began. I turn you over to British authorities with evidence of your planned cyber crimes, your surveillance of a minor, and your history of unauthorized operations that led to your dishonorable discharge. Given your background, you'd face significant prison time. Messy in public. Ree observed him, unfazed. Not your typical approach. Option 2, Calvin continued. I use my resources to ensure you never work in private security again. Your reputation would be systematically destroyed among potential clients. Your financial accounts will be frozen through various legal mechanisms. You would effectively cease to exist professionally. Following your established playbook, more elegant. I grant you option 3, Calvin went on. You sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, accept a one-time payment of $1 million, and disappear permanently from my family's life. Any future contact, direct or indirect, would trigger immediate implementation of option 2. Ree studied Calvin thoughtfully. A generous offer, considering the circumstances. Though I'm curious why choose such a clean resolution rather than the more thorough destruction you applied to Dawson? Because, unlike Bennett, you're merely a professional who overstepped, Calvin replied. Your error was in personalizing what should have remained a business transaction. I'm offering you the opportunity to correct that error. After a calculated pause, Ree nodded. Option 3 has obvious appeal. Though, I must admit some disappointment. I was curious to see how our chess match might have concluded under different circumstances. It concluded the moment you targeted my son, Calvin stated flatly. Everything since has been mere execution of an inevitable outcome. Later that day, with Reese's situation resolved through the signed NDA and financial transfer, Calvin made his final strategic decision regarding Sophia. After consulting with Liam, who had expressed cautious interest in maintaining limited contact with his mother, Calvin offered Sophia a revised arrangement. You'll return to Lakeside Heights, he informed her in his temporary office at the Cornwall estate. The monthly stipend will continue as established in our divorce agreement. Additionally, I've arranged for you to be offered a position with the Henderson Foundation, a legitimate role managing their charitable events, not a handout. Sophia looked surprised by the unexpected development. Why would you do that after everything that's happened? Because, despite your mistakes, you're still Liam's mother, Calvin replied evenly. He's expressed interest in maintaining some relationship with you, which would be facilitated by you having stable employment and social standing. And the conditions? Sophia asked perceptively. Complete confidentiality regarding my financial history and the events of the past year, Calvin stated. Monthly sessions with a family therapist before any in-person visits with Liam. And an absolute acceptance that any attempt to undermine Liam's confidence or choices will result in immediate termination of all contact. Sophia was silent for a moment before responding. You thought of everything, as usual. I protect what matters to me, Calvin said simply. Liam matters. His well-being is non-negotiable. And us? Sophia asked. Will there ever be anything beyond these calculated arrangements? Calvin's expression remained impassive. There is no us, Sophia. There hasn't been for years. What remains is a pragmatic arrangement focused solely on Liam's well-being. 3 days later, with the situation fully resolved, Calvin and Liam returned to their London townhouse. Bennett Dawson had been escorted back to Phoenix with enough capital to start a modest business unrelated to automotive sales, bound by legal agreements ensuring his permanent distance from Calvin's family. Nathan Rhee had disappeared as agreed, his threat neutralized through a combination of financial incentives and potential consequences. Sophia had returned to Lakeside Heights to begin her new position with the Henderson Foundation, with arrangements made for monitored video calls with Liam as the first step toward rebuilding their relationship under careful supervision. As Calvin and Liam settled back into their London routine, Liam approached his father in the study one evening. Dad, can I ask you something? Calvin looked up from his work. Of course. Do you ever regret how thoroughly you dismantled Mom and Mr. Dawson's lives? Not the fact that you did it, but the extent of it? Calvin considered the question thoughtfully. Regret implies I would make different choices if given another opportunity. I wouldn't. The strategy one implemented was precisely calibrated to the situation, even though it ultimately created this danger with Rhee. Every strategy has potential second-order consequences, Calvin explained. The art is in anticipating them and having contingencies ready. The Rhee situation was managed because we were prepared for such possibilities. Liam nodded slowly. I've been thinking about something Mom said, that you never forgive anyone who betrays you. That's largely accurate, Calvin admitted. I believe consequences should match actions. Your mother and Bennett betrayed my trust in profound ways over an extended period. The consequences reflected that reality. What about me? Liam asked quietly. What if I make mistakes or disappoint you someday? Calvin's expression softened immediately. Liam, there's a fundamental difference between mistakes and betrayal. Everyone makes mistakes. They're how we learn and grow. Betrayal, on the other hand, is a deliberate choice to harm someone who trusts you. I can't imagine a scenario where you would make such a choice. Liam seemed reassured by this distinction. So, the strategic mastermind has a heart after all, he said with a small smile. Only for you, Calvin replied simply. Always for you. As Liam returned to his architectural studies, Calvin reflected on the events of the past year. The mask of mediocrity he had worn for so long in Lakeside Heights had been permanently cast aside. The strategic mind that had built his financial empire had been fully revealed, both in business and in his methodical dismantling of those who had betrayed him. The silent strategist had emerged from the shadows, his true nature now known to those who mattered. For Calvin Winters, this was the only victory that had ever truly mattered. The freedom to be himself completely and to ensure his son could flourish in an environment where his talents were recognized and nurtured. The rest, the revenge, the countermeasures, the strategic maneuvering had been merely the necessary means to that essential end. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.